Hello and welcome to the War 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video, and today guys I am super excited. The excitement is oozing all over the place because the Guard have been finally given a solitary crumb of love from Games Workshop, which is great. I mean, we appreciate, of course, the plastic Krieg and the upgrade sprue for the Guard and all that good stuff. Of course we do, but there is nothing like having new rules to reinvigorate an army. It just feels so good. And so, as part of the Warzone Octarius books that are coming out, the Guard are definitely going to be getting an upgrade, and it's really, really cool. And so, yesterday, Warhammer community previewed a bunch of new Cadian stuff. So that's the first thing to mention. It's looking like this is going to be a Cadian-only upgrade. So, not upgrade for all the other regiments, just for Cadians. Now, this is, obviously, it's good. You know, it's good that the Cadians do get upgraded a little bit. Their regiment trait at the beginning of 8th was considered equal to Catachan, but as time has gone on, it has sort of slipped down. So this hopefully will reinvigorate the trait. Obviously, it is a little disappointing that the new rules that we're going to be getting can't be applied to any regiment. But we've only seen one teaser so far. There very well may be other teasers coming, which show that it's not just Cadian regiments, but at this time it's looking like, and I would put money on, this is going to be a Cadian only upgrade. Well, we don't know yet, but I have a strong suspicion that if these new rules are strong enough, that we're going to be seeing a lot of Cadians. We're going to be seeing a lot of Cadian regiments out there, which is fine. Yeah, that's cool. But anyway, let's dive straight into the new rules that have been previewed. Now, I'm just going to have a cycle of pictures coming up here, guys, so you'll be able to. So if you don't know if you missed the White Shields rule the first time, it's going to come back round again. Of course, pause the video at any point that you want and read the various rules. There will be a link to the Warhammer community article down in the description below as well. So the first thing to mention is that the White Shields, the conscripts, are getting a buff. Now, you guys, anyone who's been following this channel for any length of time will know that I got an extremely uncomfortable feeling in my trousers when I saw that conscripts were getting a buff. Okay, like you guys know I love the conscripts, okay? And the fact that it looks like Cadian conscripts are going to be actually really, really good is just fantastic. One of the things that I've been saying for a while now is that GW needs to start walking back some of the nerfs that they put onto conscripts in 8th edition, because they really just don't make sense now in terms of, like, you know, power and whatnot in 9th edition. And that's what they started doing. So, one of the first things that I want to talk about is the White Shields upgrades. This is a pre-game stratagem, and it costs between 1 and 3 command points. And it basically depends on how many units of conscripts you want to upgrade, will be how many command points it costs. Now, when I first, literally before I read things, when I first read this, I was like, okay, so it'll be 1 command point for 1 unit of conscripts and 3 command points for 2 units of conscripts. Because that's kind of how our relics work, right? But that's not the case. It's literally for 1 to 2 units of conscripts, to upgrade them to White Shields is only 1 command point, which is fantastic, because I think the majority of Guard armies that are going to be running, White Shields, we're talking the vast majority. We're not talking about pure infantry spam players here, but the vast majority of conscripts that are going to be out there, Imperial Guard players out there running conscripts, are only going to take 1 to 2 squads. So it's 1 command point to just upgrade, all your conscripts, which is kind of cool. Now, if you are like a mad bastard like myself who likes to run more than 2 units of conscripts, if you take 3 to 4 units, it'll cost you 2 CP, which is still fine. It's still absolutely fine. I am more than happy to take 4 units of conscripts and upgrade them all to White Shields. Do you know what I mean? It's not a big CP investment for me, because I'm the Guard. I don't have a lot of pre-game CP in my regular Guard army unless I'm taking loads of detachments. So that's fine. And then if you want to take 5 or more units of conscripts, it costs 3 CP. Now, here's the kicker. Now, here's the interesting thing. It's not 5 to 6 units of conscripts equals 3 CP. Technically, it's 5 or more. Which means if you turn up with 5, 6, 7, 8 units of conscripts, then that 3 CP stratagem actually starts becoming exponentially or cheaper per unit. It's kind of crazy. Now, before any of you are like, oh, but we know who would turn up with so many conscripts? Well, I would, number one. And number two, here's the interesting thing. It doesn't have to be 30-man blobs of conscripts. You could take lots of 20-man use of conscripts and get more out of your CP. So but even if you were taking 30-man conscripts, it's 150 points, and that means for 30 conscripts, that means you could take 8 units of conscripts, which is only 1,200 points, and you could upgrade them all for 3 CP. You could take all the infantry in your army and upgrade them in this way, which is just something to be aware of. I'm not saying that you're going to do that. I'm just saying read the wording of the stratagem very carefully. It literally says 5 or more. Okay? So there you go. And it's might be tricky because obviously you've got battalion, which can only take 6. But, people take brigades. Take 12 troop choices in a brigade. And there's, sentinels aren't tax units anymore if you can use them for getting engage points and stuff, for your brigade. So it's just something to be aware of. Anyway, I don't want to really focus on that one thing. I just thought it was funny. Anyway, continuing on. What do you get if you upgrade or your million conscripts to white shields? So, the first thing is you gain the white shield keyword. Great. Second thing you gain is leadership 6. Not really a big buff. I mean, you're still going to have to take a leadership test when you take 1 casualty. And realistically, if you're running this many conscripts, you're probably going to either not care about the leadership or try and mitigate it by like a commissar, who will then, of course, be giving them out leadership 9. And if you put the warlord trait on him, draconian disciplinarian, I believe that's what it's called, then he just starts executing people and they don't run away. So, that's, you don't care about leadership 6. So the leadership 6 thing is really not a big deal. It's a bit fluffy to represent that they're actually as disciplined as a regular guardsman, because a regular guardsman is leadership 6 and a sergeant is leadership 7. But the big thing that you get here is they lose the raw recruits ability. And that's what you're paying for. That is alone, I kid you not, I exaggerate in no way, shape or form, that is alone genuinely game winning. Okay? Why is it genuinely game winning? Because raw recruits is the one thing that makes you want to keep taking regular infantry squads over conscripts, because you can't order your conscripts around reliably, and you need reliability in a guard army because we're so close to the wire. You need things to go off. It's why things like re-rolling random number of shots on battle cans stuff and re-rolling wands, all this kind of stuff, is so important to the guard army. So you want your orders to go off reliably, and if your conscripts can now accept orders, like I said, they're starting to walk back some of these bullshit nerfs they put in the beginning of 8th, then that's just so good. Now, why is that so good? Because being able to move a unit onto an enemy's objective and take that off them is one of the few ways that regular guard can actually compete in competitive play. Now, I have a favourite tactic when I'm using my guard of what I call just slingshotting squads at the board, where I take an infantry squad, I move and advance them, and then I move them, and I move on to an enemy's objective, and then it comes to their turn, and my opponent might only have 1 or even non-objectives. Now, if you're playing some missions in 40k, if your opponents are only holding 1 objective, they may score no primary. Now the disadvantage of that tactic is you have to throw those guardsmen up there, and then inevitably it's only a 10-man squad, so then they die. Another problem with trying to do it sometimes as well is you have to conga line backwards, and a 10-man squad only has a certain size footprint, taking into account the new coherency rule. And that means that sometimes your opponent has got some obsec models on his own objective. You're trying to move onto it. You might need to get 5 or 6 models onto the objective to cancel the enemy out. And on a long squad that's strung out, that can be difficult to do. Now, you could start paying for vox casters and stuff, but then you're paying points, and things are already a bit expensive in the guard at the moment, so you don't really want to do that. But being able to do it on a unit of conscripts is massive, because you've got a 30-man blob. You can conga line back. You can string back huge distances, not worry about vox casters, and still probably get a third of the unit onto an enemy objective, which is still going to easily out-obsec the majority of enemies that you come across. So it's absolutely fantastic. You might see if this is like the ability to, get loads of lasgun shots in first rank fire, second rank fire, and that is still very, that is still possible. But the number one way I see this being used is not for the firepower, but is to be able to get huge blobs of conscripts onto enemy objectives. And the best thing about being able to put a huge blob of conscripts on enemy objective is it's going to take them a semi-significant amount of firepower to clear those conscripts off. Unlike a 10-man infantry squad, which the enemy can just use its, what I often term spare firepower, just whatever they've got left over, a few bolt pistols and bolters and shurikens, this and that, whatnot left over, and they just clear that 10-man squad off, and the main firepower is still hitting your front line. Well, you can't do that when it's 30 conscripts just sat on your objective. You can't do that. It's just not okay. You need to be able to take out 30 wounds. So it's a real biggie. Now, I did speak about obviously first rank fire, second rank fire before. A unit of 30 conscripts in rapid fire range is going to be putting out 120 shots. Now, the thing is, the reason why I'm not, from a thematic fluff point of view, I am all over the first rank fire, second rank fire conscripts. It's cool. Throwing buckets of dice feels great. Drowning opponents in lasgun shots is always just a fun thing to do. However, competitively, it's probably not as good for a number of reasons. Firstly, because you're taking the Cadian trait, you're only going to have a 12-inch rapid fire. And as someone who has been really marinating themselves in the 18-inch rapid fire custom regiment trait, and someone who before that was using Armageddon Steel Legion to have an 18-inch rapid fire, going back down to a 12-inch rapid fire is really difficult. And with a big squad like Conscripts, who you may be conga lining, you will struggle to get all 30 into rapid fire range unless you are literally getting a point blank volley off. So that's just one thing to be aware of. However, there is another advantage of being Cadian, which kind of balances it out. You have access to overlapping fields of fire, which is the ability to get a +1 to hit against an enemy unit. That's quite big. Now, I've personally experienced this multiple times. I took a unit of conscripts, I got first rank fire, second rank fire off on them, and then I used the Blackstone Fortress Psyker Adria Magellan, I think that's how you pronounce it, to get +1 to hit on them, and they actually were able to just gun down 2 or 3 Terminators, which is quite a big deal. You just pure weight of dice, you just make the enemy start rolling those ones. Now, that was with one squad, and there's a video about that on this channel. In fact, I'll link it at the end of this one. Okay, so when I went to a one-day tournament and I just gunned down a bunch of Deathwing Terminators with lasguns. Imagine being able to pull off the same trick with multiple units of conscripts. But then on top of that, imagine those conscripts are not only hitting on 4s because of overlapping fields of fire, but you've been able to stay still with them, so you're getting reroll 1s to hit as well from the Cadian trait, which hasn't changed, by the way. So there is potential for this to do some damage. But I would see that as a secondary concern, with the primary concern being this is the way to just take objectives off people. That's the more competitive thing, and you keep the first rank fire stuff in your back pocket for as a toolbox sort of option to have. Now those are the first two things that come to my mind when I'm talking about this trait. I'm sure there will be other things. If you can think of some other great uses of being able to order conscripts, put it down in the comment section below. Now, one of the other big things that they've talked about now is a 1 CP stratagem called Cadia Stands. And that's what they've also revealed in this Warhammer community article. And it's a real doozy. It is really nice. It's like a better version of the Take Cover stratagem. So Cadia Stands is you can put this on any Cadian infantry unit from your army. So what about those big units of conscripts that we've just been talking about? And you give them semi-transhuman, which means they can only be wounded on 3s, 4s, 5s and 6s. Which means anything that would normally wound you on a 2, like anything strength 6 or higher, isn't going to wound you. No wound roll. 1s always fail, as we know, to wound, but now 2s also always fail. So that's actually really good. Now some people will say, oh, well, what's the big deal about this? What's the big deal? Let me tell you, okay, Firstly, there's a lot of high strength attacks out there these days, and just being able to reduce the amount of damage that your big infantry blob is taking by 16% is nice. The second thing to mention is one of the most popular units out there at the moment is the double Volca Contempt Dreadnaught, which exclusively puts out an absolute shitload of strength 6 firepower. So what you've done from this, which also has no AP, okay, so what you're doing with the stratagem is absolutely neutering the ability for those Volkite Dreads to blast your units off the table, because the other part of the stratagem not only does it give you the semi-transhuman, but it also lets you anything that has an attack damage characteristic of 1 lets you gets +1 to the armor saving throw. So that bit won't help you against Volkite Dreads because they are damage 2, unfortunately. But you could still take cover on this unit. So you would have a unit of conscripts which have which you can only wound on 3s or better, which will have a 4+ armor save as well. Just from being able to spend 2 CP on them. So that's really, really nice. And if you're facing anything that is damage 1, then you can combine take cover and Cadia stands. So you'd have semi-transhuman on your conscripts and a 3-up armor save. And then you go and cover. Actual cover, so you're on a 2-up armor save. In fact, if you really take this to the absolute nth degree, it starts getting a little crazy. So this is something that I just put together, an idea that I put together in just a few seconds, which was a few seconds. Sounds very arrogant. This jumped into my head when I started seeing the stratagem, which was you take 30 conscripts, you put them in cover. Now, a lot of tournaments will have the ability for you to hold an objective whilst being in cover. So you put them in cover, so you're on a 4-up save. Use take cover on them, so you're on a 3-up save. Use Cadia stands, so you're on a 2-up save and can only be wounded on 1s and 2s. You put Psychic Barrier on them, so they're on a 1-up save. You put Night Shroud on them, so they're on a 1-up save -1. And you take an Allied Inquisitor to put Warding Incantation on them, which means they've got a 5 vulnerable save, but because of Psychic Barrier, you're on a 4 vulnerable save. Which means you get 30 child soldiers, which is what White Shields are. They're teenage soldiers. You take 30 child soldiers and you have them with a 1+ armor save and a 4+ invulnerable save, and they can only be wounded on a 3+. And then you smile when the enemy flips the table. That's actually an insane amount of durability, and it's not that expensive to do. That you could pull that off for 30 conscripts, 150 points. You could but do you even need the warding incantation? This is the thing, because you're going to be on a 1-up anyway. Someone's going to have to hit you with what, a -3, so you go from a 1-up to a 2-up to a 3-up to a 4. So yeah, I mean, it would give you an extra save against Melter, but you probably wouldn't be worried about that. So you could probably get away without even having the Inquisitor. So that's actually only going to cost you 220 points. Because it costs you 150 points for the conscripts, and then all you need is 2 Astropaths, which are 35 points each. You could probably take like a Primaris Psyker and the Word Veins and use a stratagem for to get +2 to cast. So I think that would cost the same amount of points, but would cost you 1 more CP, but would more reliably get the powers off. Either way, what we're talking about here, guys, is between, it's about basically 220 points if you don't bother with the Inquisitor. If you take the Inquisitor, it's 280 points. But 220 points to basically have a 1-up save unit, which is only really going to start struggling when someone slams a Melter Gun into it. Which, if they do slam a Melter Gun into it, you can only be wounded on 1s and 2s. That Melter Gun is only 66% effective. Not like 86% effective. So it's pretty nice. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's pretty nice. So that's really, really powerful. And that's kind of the main thing that I want to talk about with this video. That's the big tamale. That's the big combo there. Now there are some other little bits. I correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but it doesn't look like Born Soldiers has changed. So if you stay still, you get to reroll 1s in the shooting phase. If you stay still and get given the take aim order, you can reroll all hits. Fine. You're not going to be staying still with conscripts. The other thing that a couple of things they mentioned was Bastogne Sword. Now, this is a bit of a... I actually got a little sad about this. So, Lucas Bastogne was a special character in 5th edition, and he's not obviously appeared since 5th edition Codex. And in this article, they actually confirmed that he died, which is a bit of a shame because he was actually... he died in the defense of Cadia. And it's a bit of a shame because he was super cool. And... it's also a little bit of a shame because it's another special character that's been taken away from the Guard. Like, if it had been me, if I'd been Games Workshop, I would have actually released him I would have brought him back and released a model for him. See what I mean? How cool would have that been to bring back Lucas Bastogne? As it is, they've killed him off. And they have nodded to him. And it is nice to have a little bit of a nod to him. Because now you can take his relic power sword. His power sword as a relic. It's okay. It's quite a nice power sword. It's +2 strength and +1 strength. It's AP -3 standard. And it's a flat damage too. It's quite nice. You know, it's 5-point upgrade. But Guard characters don't really want to be in combat. You can only give it to a Cadian character. So you're only going to be giving it to like a company commander or a platoon commander. You know, just something to be aware of. I mean... yeah, it's not great, but it has a special ability, which is when you're within 6 inches of the bearer, you ignore combat attrition test modifiers. So basically, when you fail a morale test, you only run away on 1s, even if you're below half strength. You never run away on 1s and 2s. So it's a nice little nod. It's not as good as the Lost Relic of Cadia, though, but it's a nice little fluff upgrade. Like I said, personally, I see it as a little bit of a missed opportunity. I would have brought Bastogne back and then have him as a model that people can, you know, even as a special release, because special release models get just bought up like hotcakes. So that's how I would have done it. And then the other thing is they brought back the Gifted Commander trait, a little nod to Lord Cassin Uskar E. Creed. And this, I can never say, Creed! That's how you say his name. Basically, once you've deployed your armies, but before the first battle round begins, you can, this is a warlord trait, you can select one Cadian vehicle unit, not including Titanic units. Bit of a shame because, you know, it used to be a bit of a joke that he could outflank like a Baneblade, and now he can't do that, but whatever. But you can take one Cadian vehicle unit from your army, which could be a tank commander, or it could be like a squadron of up to 3, like Liam Russes, or 3 Hellhounds, or up to 3 non-vehicle Cadian units. So that could be 3 units of infantry, it could be 3 units of conscripts or something, and you can redeploy them. Okay, so to read it, and then and if you use strategic reserve, you can put them in strategic reserve for no CP. So that's quite nice. One way I thought of doing this is like you could take, you know, your 3 like I like to take 3 veteran squads all with plasma, but the problem with those guys is that they tend to be quite CP intensive when you outflank them. You could just do it for free now, which is cool. You could do the same thing like command squads. You could outflank 2 command squads and an officer. That would be free. You could combine this Gifted Commander Warlord trait with the Dagger of Tusaka, which is just a regular old relic, and that would allow you to outflank an officer and 4 infantry units, which is nice. You know, when you think about it, that's actually really, really powerful. So there's a lot you can do with this. I mean, you know, there's just a lot you can do with this, so it's kind of interesting. Let me just read this Gifted Commander. I don't believe you can do it outside of your deployment zone. So after both players deploy their armies before the first battle round begins, select 1 Cadian vehicle unit, excluding Titanic units from your army that is in your deployment zone, or up to 3 non-vehicle Cadian units from your army that are in your deployment zone, and redeploy them. The mission uses strategic reserves rules. Any of these units can be placed in strategic reserves that would spend any additional CPs. Regardless of how many units are already in strategic reserves, if both players have abilities that would redeploy units roll off. So I think you still have to stay in deployment zone. I don't think you can redeploy outside your deployment zone. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. But what this would allow you to do is to, I believe, I believe it would allow you to also get past the restrictions for how much you can have in Deep Strike. Because it says, regardless of how many units are already in Strategic Reserves. So, maybe it's a bit like the Gene Occult stuff, which lets you get past the limit on how much you can have in reserve. I don't know. Anyway, that's all for now, guys. Let me know what you think. I hope you guys are super excited as I am. It's looking like, from this article, definite nod Games Workshop's like, you know, pure infantry, big infantry tactics. You know, that's what I'm seeing. You know, they've got wide shields, that upgrades infantry. They've got Cadian Stance, that's for infantry. They've got Bastogne Sword, which is good for infantry. They've got Gifted Commander, which heavily favours, you know, 3 non-vehicle Cadian units. So there's a lot going on here. I think it's definitely a bit of an indication that, you know, infantry spam could be the way to go. We'll obviously have to see what else they release. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.